What's up, homies? JP back at you once again, bringing you guys my top 10 trilogies. This is going to be a top 10 video. A few weeks ago, the homies, did a top 10 trilogies for Top 10 Tuesdays, and I wanted to hop on, but I was having a difficult time coming up with my 10 favorite horror movie trilogies. Because of a few things. One, every time I would come up with a trilogy like the Sleepaway Camp trilogy, I would be like, oh shit, it is not a trilogy because Return to Sleepaway Camp. And then there's even that weird like Survivor one that they kind of remastered, but it's not really a movie and it's not really official, so it's kind of stupid and pointless to even bring up. But there is Return to Sleepaway Camp, which makes it not a trilogy. And my rules are very simple. There must be 3 films and only 3 films. There cannot be a 4th film in terms of a sequel, in terms of a prequel, in terms of a remake. There just cannot be a 4th film at all, or it is a franchise. Now, you can have one film, a sequel, and a remake. That's a trilogy still, which you might disagree, but that's kind of the rules that we set up for this. So, for example, the Hitcher remake, and The Hitcher 2 make it a trilogy. But if there is a, film and then a sequel and then a remake and then a prequel, it's no longer a trilogy, it's a franchise. So that's how we kind of determined the rules, and that made it hard to find a film series with only 3 films that I liked all 3 of the films. Some of them I haven't seen, like Stepfather 1 and 2 I've seen, but I haven't seen Stepfather 3, so I couldn't use Stepfather as a trilogy. And most of the time, I like 2 out of the 3 films, like Creepshow. So Creepshow 1, Creepshow 2, but I hate Creepshow 3. So it really was kind of hard to decide how I wanted to go about making this list. Very hard. Anyway, let's get into it. This is just an honorable mention. Basket Case did not make it, but it was very close. I just had such a bad experience with Basket Case 2 and 3 that as much as I love the glorious Something Weird Blu-ray of Basket Case 1, I just can't put it in my top 10 favorite trilogies because I only like 1 out of the 3 films, really. Alright, so moving on to the actual top 10, we have coming in at number 10, the Slumber Party Massacre Trilogy. And I've been on record before saying that I don't really like these films. And that's kind of true, but I actually do like the first one a lot. It's just been a little while since I've seen it. I've learned to like it a little bit more based on its sort of reputation, how it came about, the history about the film. The cult classic nature of the film makes me like it a little bit more, and the sequel I've grown to appreciate a little bit more from, the internet and like the cult following that it has for being ridiculous and stuff. Do not remember part 3 at all. Don't remember anything about it right now because it's been like 7 years since I've seen these movies, or at least 5 years, and I don't remember a damn thing. I gotta rewatch these things eventually. I've been wanting to, actually, so I will do that very soon. Coming in at number 9, we have the Feast Trilogy. The first Feast film is so good. I love the story behind it. I like how it came about. It's really unique, very clever. The second Feast film, a huge step down. Really ridiculous, cheesy, over the top. The monsters don't even look the same. Same thing goes with Feast 3. Those 2 movies are like the same movie. But yet they still have this charming quality about them that if you kind of can stoop down to their level, you can enjoy them. So for that reason, the Feast Trilogy makes my number 9 spot, even though I only really like the first film. Coming in at number 8, we have The Lost Boys. Now, The Lost Boys definitely helps by how much I love the first film. So the trilogy gets bumped up simply for the fact that the Lost Boys is in my top 10 favorite horror films of all time. Lost Boys 2, a huge step down, not even close, but what did you expect? I didn't expect much, and that's what I got. Not really a too good of a film, very average, but it's got Corey Feldman, I guess. Lost Boys, The Thirst, which is the third one, actually kind of takes a step back up and is alright. It's an alright Lost Boys film. Altogether, I do like the trilogy, and, it's not very good, honestly, but the first film's so good. I don't know. It's hard to really create this list, guys. So this was number 8. Let's move on to number 7. We have the Maniac Cop Trilogy. So Maniac Cop is classic. Maniac Cop 2 is better than the first one, arguably. Maniac Cop 3, straight dud. Yeah, it's like an average movie at best. So that's another case where you like the first two films a lot and the third one is a huge letdown. But I like the first two films enough to where I can definitely consider it a favorite trilogy of mine. You know, the third one does round off the film, so at least that there is a trilogy. But the second one is just so good. I mean, like the fire scene where the guy's like on fire, like in a car chase, is ridiculous. It's been a while since I've watched these movies, but I definitely love them. The Maniac Cop Trilogy, pretty cool stuff, and that's why it's my number 7 favorite trilogy. So moving on, we have my number 6 favorite trilogy, which is the Animal Trilogy, aka Dario Argento's Animal Trilogy. These films really don't have much in common. It is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, The Cat of Nine Tails, and of course Four Flies on Grey Velvet. The only thing they have in common is A, they're directed by Dario Argento, B, they all have similar titles, and C, they are giallo films. But besides that, that's all they have in common. Really cool film in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I actually really like it. I might have even rated it lower than I actually feel about it now after giving it a long time and a long time thinking about it. It's a film that we discussed heavily in detail on an episode of the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror podcast during Italian Month, Dario Argento Spotlight. If you want to check that out, I think it was in the 50s, somewhere around episode 58 or something, maybe early 60s. I can't really remember. Cat o' Nine Tails and Four Flies are not as good, but The Bird with the Crystal Plumage definitely bumps the trilogy up, and it is kind of sort of an iconic trilogy. So that is number 6. Coming in at number 5, I was a little hesitant to rank this high, but I decided to go with it anyway. It is the Hostile Trilogy. The first Hostel is one of my all-time favorite horror films. It's so well done in my opinion. All around directed, acted, just a cool film. And honestly, it still surprises me that this was a mainstream horror film. Very mainstream. Everybody was talking about it. Really interesting. Hostel 2, it was one of my most hyped movies ever when it was coming out. Like, I could not wait. I ended up being a little bit disappointed by it, but over time I became more into it and I liked it a little bit more. Hostel 3, I don't really remember that much, but I do remember liking it. So although it was not directed by Eli Roth and it was a step down, I still liked Hostel 3, so for that, the trilogy makes my number 5 spot. Coming in at number 4, we have the Ginger Snaps Trilogy, which I actually like all 3 films in the Ginger Snaps Trilogy. So you have Ginger Snaps 1, which is my favorite werewolf film of all time. You have Ginger Snaps 2, which is a decent follow-up. Of course, it's a little bit of a step down, but still very awesome. It's been a while since I've seen it. Probably need to revisit it. And Ginger Snaps 3, which I actually don't own. I've only seen it one time, but I do remember liking it. So for that reason, the Ginger Snaps Trilogy is my number 4 favorite trilogy of all time. Coming in at number 4. Number 3, which we're breaking into the number 3 now. This is a trilogy that I actually like all 3 films, like the Ginger Snaps Trilogy, and that is the Hatchet Trilogy. Hatchet 1 was such a blast when it came out. It says old school American horror, but it's not really. It's more of a horror comedy. It's like a very good horror comedy, I guess. I love Adam Green. The commentaries are good. The special features are good. I just really like the Hatchet trilogy, and I like Adam Green's films. I like the sort of a little thing that he built up with his sort of cult following. He has a podcast and stuff. But the first Hatchet film is great. The second Hatchet film is even better, and the third Hatchet film is my favorite. I think the third Hatchet film, although it is sort of a step down in its story from the first 2, I do think that Hatchet 3 is the best directed. Oddly enough, Adam Green did not direct Hatchet 3. So that is my number 3 favorite horror trilogy. Coming in at number 2, this might surprise some of you, but it is the Insidious Trilogy. That's right, it is the Insidious Trilogy. So the first Insidious film is a near perfect movie for me. It is scary, it is scored well, the cinematography's good, the story's done well. There's really no problems I have with it, and it is one of the scariest movies I've seen in recent memory. Insidious 2, although a bit of a step down, mostly ruined for me by the trailer, I still very much enjoyed Insidious 2, and Insidious 3 was a huge surprise. I honestly liked Insidious 3 a lot too. So altogether, you have a solid trilogy with anchored by the first film, which is an absolute classic and will be talked about um, in the likes of the films that we consider classics today. So yeah, in the future, people will talk about Insidious as if it is the you know, films that we grew up on, like the Amityville Horror. So yeah, that is Insidious Trilogy coming in at number 2. Probably a pretty big surprise. And number 1, this was a surprise to me. I didn't even really know that this was my favorite trilogy until I sat there and really thought about it. And that is the Gates of Hell Trilogy. That's right, The Beyond, City of the Living Dead, and House by the Cemetery. Almost forgot that. Yeah, surprisingly, I love these movies. I just watched them all for the first time this year, minus City of the Living Dead, which I seen a few years ago. These films are fucking so good, man. Lucio Fulci trilogy there. The Gates of Hell trilogy. This version right here, this Grindhouse releasings of The Beyond, super fucking dope, man. I mean, I love City of the Living Dead. The Beyond is my second favorite, but City of the Living Dead is just so good. The atmosphere is great. The gore is fantastic. When the dude's throwing up his guts and shit, and dude, like that still gets to me every time. Or the chick. Anyway, that is my top 10 favorite trilogies. Not really many that I like all three films. Like, there's not many trilogies where all three films are good. It's very, very weird. There's a lot of trilogies that used to exist that are not trilogies anymore, so you can't put them in this list. Yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for watching.